Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Let's Max Warframe, where today we're going to take a look at a weapon that people have been asking for these last couple of videos. A weapon that, like a lot of the things I've done recently, have been in the game for a long time, but get almost no playtime whatsoever. We are going to be taking a look at the sidearm favoured by the Grineer Seekers, the Kraken. Now, as I've mentioned, Tenno will be familiar with the Kraken as the destroyer of squishy frames, if you manage to get on the wrong end of that 2-shot burst. So can we expect the same from the weapon in the hands of the Tenno? Well, with a base damage of 45 per round, with the majority 33 coming in the form of impact, and 5.6 as both puncture and slash, is definitely on the lower end of the secondary weapon damage charts. Although, since this is a burst fire weapon, puts out a 2-round burst, so provided you land both shots, each burst does do 90 damage at a time, which isn't that bad. This did get much better with the buff to burst fire weapons. The increase of fire rate actually affecting the burst of the weapon means that you can actually fire both of those shots of the burst almost immediately, one after the other. Other than that, the supporting stats aren't really the best. Critical chance of just 5%, 200% multiplier, means that building this for crit really isn't worth the effort at all. And with just a 10% status chance, a full status build isn't really the best either. Now, in terms of disadvantages, it does have quite a few. The fire rate isn't the greatest, and there's kind of a weird delay after firing before you can reload. So unlike a lot of weapons where you can press R to reload and manually speed up the fairly sizable reloads of some weapons, the Kraken's is fairly sizable. It does have a reload speed of 2.5 seconds. The Kraken isn't able to do that because of that weird delay, and that does hurt it somewhat. In addition to the fact that the supporting stats really aren't the greatest, it also does have a fairly high amount of vertical recoil, which without any recoil compensation, whether it be manual or through the use of mods, it can make it difficult to land both shots on target. But with a little bit of practice, the mod really isn't needed, as it's not too difficult to manage that recoil by yourself. Although that being said, fire rate affecting burst speed does just make that job just that little bit harder. Okay, so let's move on to starting to mod the Kraken. Now, it doesn't come with any polarities as standard. We're going to add 4 former, which is going to be 3 Vs and a dash. Now, we've got 4 mods remaining the same between the 3 builds: Hornet Strike for damage, Barrel Diffusion for multi-shot, Lethal Torrent for extra multi-shot, as well as buffing that fire rate up a little bit, and we got Quick Draw to bring down that reload speed. Now, in terms of the actual elemental mods we're going to use a mixture of status and we're going to use a mixture of elemental. Now, I said earlier, full status isn't really the way to go with this, but a mixture of the two can actually be very effective. So, bearing in mind we've got 2 of these on, we've got these 2 of the dual stats here, it brings the status chance up to a pretty decent 50%, which means that basically of every burst, you're pretty much going to get 1 status proc every burst, which actually can be it can be useful in procking. I mean, if you want a viral proc or a radiation proc, impact procs for the stagger are very, very useful as well. So having this sort of combination, especially on the sort of lower end weapons, it can keep the actual weapon relevant just that little bit longer and take a little bit more heat off of your frame. So for the Grineer, we're going to go with the Radiation Viral build, Frostbite and Pathogen Rounds to bring up Viral, Jolt and Primed Heated Charge to bring up the Radiation. And against the Corpus, we got Frostbite and Convulsion for Magnetic, and Toxin and Pathogen Rounds, Pestle Pestilence and Pathogen Rounds for the Toxin damage, for the just to cut straight through the shields and hit the HP of those Corpus. And for the Void, Pathogen Rounds and Jolt for Corrosive, Scorch and Primed Heated Charge for the heat damage, for the extra damage on the heavy units in the Void. Now, if you want to do the Corrosive Projection Void, and you need the viral for that, you can switch out Frostbite for Jolt, and then you'll get the viral and heat combo that you need for the Corrosive Projection Void. So do I think the Kraken is worth the time, effort and former to max it? And the answer is absolutely no way. The Kraken is a seriously mediocre weapon. Even the standard Lex puts out more damage than this does. Now I've seen people try and justify that by saying the Kraken fires 2 shots in a burst, which does more damage per burst than the Lex does, but it's really, it doesn't work that way. It's still 2 rounds to do the job that other sidearms only have to fire 1 to do. The Kraken will keep you going through the star map and into the void fairly reasonably, and it will still be effective, well, fairly effective, in the non-endless Tower 3 and Tower 4 void missions. So if you're looking for a sidearm that's just different, and you don't really care about T4 survival past 20 minutes or something, the Kraken will do just fine for you. Now the funny thing is, much like the Hind I reviewed fairly recently, I've actually got no regrets putting the former on here. The weapon itself is fairly amusing, it's kind of fun to play with. Like the Hind, it's not a particularly good weapon, but for the sheer novelty factor, I mean, how often have you seen people running around with the Kraken, and then when you come top of the damage in lobbies full of Soma Primes, Bolter Primes, Sancti Tigresses, Hex, knowing full well they're looking at that and scratching their head. For those moments, I honestly feel it's worth the investment, but actually as a weapon in Warframe, as a sidearm, it's not a particularly good one at all. So, little bit of news. Apparently DE saw my video saying I was going to take a break for a week and decided that tomorrow, Wednesday the 25th, well, today I guess when this actually comes out, on all platforms, the first of the Chinese Warframes Wukong will be released into the game, alongside the Temple Rhino skin, as well as all the premium skins like the X-Cal Proto and Glaive Proto, the Valkyr skin, the Sarin skin. They will be returning to the market on a permanent basis. So what this means is that tomorrow's suit up is going to be delayed, since I had absolutely no idea a frame was going to be dropping tomorrow, especially with update 18 around the corner. And I will get a first look at Wukong video out as soon as that drops instead. Now I am going to say this does not mean update 18 is coming tomorrow. That is still scheduled for December the 2nd, and once the Wukong video is done, then I will take my break to get other stuff done before update 18. So the Kraken. It's a mid-tier weapon at best, but one that does have a certain charm to it. Not one I can recommend the former being worth the investment, unless you like that novelty factor about it. So as always guys, many thanks for watching, and I shall see you in the next video. Oh, and by the way, remember to unleash the Kraken. Bet you all thought you'd got away without that pun, eh?